Blood of the Archon. Chapter 9. The Sorcerer's Awakening. No one had heard anything of Percival since the murder in the woods. A fair folk woman, a hunter, it looked like, was killed in her bed, and then Percival had robbed her. Tessia wouldn't have believed it if the hounds hadn't tracked him there by his scent. The scene was much more brutal than Jamie's murder. The elf had been decapitated, and then once again drained of her blood. Tessia felt sick just looking at it. By the gods. Edric surveyed the scene, his eyes the size of dinner plates. How? Why? Why didn't Percival just rob her? Why would he do this? He can't be well. Tessia shook her head. No sane person would do something like this. He must be mad or possessed. The commander gritted his teeth. Or maybe he's just evil. No such thing, she responded quickly. But looking down at the elf's gaunt face, she wasn't sure if she believed that anymore. She always held that people were neither good nor evil, that they were just people who were capable of good or evil things. She'd seen paladins take pleasure in the needless torment of the sorcerers, but they weren't evil. Saying they were simply evil would absolve them of their crimes. They were just as capable of kindness as they were of cruelty, and they chose cruelty. Edric rested his hand on the blade. Mad or no, he must be brought to justice, and this, if he were a sorcerer, I'd suggest he be sundered from his magic, but I can't see any justice for this, aside from death. Her nose curled in disgust. Do not speak to me of sundering, Commander, she spat venomously. I have lost many friends to that, nor do I think death is the only option. Do not pretend you are innocent. Lord Chaplain Helena's abuses were an open secret among the arcane colleges. His lips were sealed, and Tessia turned away, storming off. The way he could be so callous sometimes infuriated her. It was as if he was some hapless associate of Lord Chaplain Helena, and not her right-hand man. The rite of sundering was a cruel practice, where a sorcerer's connection with magic was shattered entirely. It left them mindless husks, unable to cast spells or do anything aside from follow simple instructions and perform manual labor. The Covenant called it unnecessary evil. Tessia called it slavery. Edric had done cruel things. Tessia had heard from sorcerers who had first-hand experience, and he seemed to think simply serving the Legion of the Gods was enough to atone for that. It was like it didn't matter who he hurt, as long as he was doing something now. Then he had the audacity to suggest execution. She couldn't deny it was an option, especially if, when she caught Percival, he showed no remorse for his actions. But the only option, if Percival wasn't worthy of redemption, how could she be? It was the night before her awakening, the ceremony where a sorcerer discovers their magical aptitude, and the entirety of the Eastwell Arcane College was abuzz with excitement. Tessia had many friends in her time at the college, although most were only interested in her influence her family held in feeling in politics. She didn't mind, of course. She was used to having people who wanted to get close to her just to get close to her family. Ever since she was a child, before her magic even manifested. She was wringing her hands and pacing her room, which she shared with the one woman she considered a true friend, Liara. She was an orphan from Windhollow who had been left to die on the streets until she was found by a group of paladins. Unlike most sorcerers, she viewed the college as her salvation from the streets and was grateful for the security it gave her. Tessia didn't always understand her, but she was glad to have a friend that didn't care about her noble birth. Stop pacing, Tessia. You're going to give me a headache, Liara moaned, clutching her forehead dramatically. Easy for you to say. You've already had your awakening, and you won't even tell me what it entails. Tessia glared at her friend. Sorry. Rules are rules. Tessia groaned. You're awful. You love me, Liara laughed. Just before sunset, Tessia was approached by the administrator, who was flanked by 2 armored paladins. Usually, while within the walls of the college, the paladins wore simple leather fatigues, but now they wore heavily enchanted plate mail and full-faced helmets, concealing their identities. It was what they wore when a mage was sundered, so if they lashed out with their magic, trying to prevent the ritual, they'd have no one to direct their anger at. But Tessia wasn't scared. She knew how much coin her family had put into Eastwell College, and she knew they couldn't afford to lose that support. She wasn't particularly powerful, and she'd never been any more rebellious than any of the other young apprentices. So when they led her up the stairs to the administrator's office, then through a small hidden door behind the bookshelf, she wasn't afraid. Even as they continued to move up the tower, up and up, farther than outside geometry the tower should have allowed, her footfalls did not falter. She had been preparing for this test for her entire life, ever since she set her governess's hair alight at the dinner table as a child, and the paladins had stood outside her manor door, framed by the storm and lightning that characterized the climate of Eastwell, come to take her to the college and away from everything she had ever known. This was the fate of all sorcerers if they did not wish to become apostates of the Covenant. The awakening was her final test, and she would not fail. Eventually, they reached a large wooden door. It was carved with intricate runes, some of which she understood, most of which she didn't. There were runes from the ancient Aethic mountain tribes, some were from the long-dead dragon-worshipping empire of Wyveria, and some of them, though she didn't recognize them at the time, were the language of the Draugr. The administrator stepped ahead of the group and placed his hands on the door. His hands began to glow with iridescent energy, a magic Tessie had never seen up until that point, the magic of phantasma. He began chanting in a language she couldn't understand, and then the door shattered. Tessie had seen magical doors open before. All of the college's professors and officials' offices had them, but she had never seen anything like this. The very space around the door seemed to fold into itself, break into fractal shapes, and then warp away in a brilliant flash of rainbow-colored light. And then they were standing in front of a dark entry, devoid of light and sound and feeling. Tessie felt her hands begin to crackle with elemental energy, and then she stepped forward. Her sleep that night was restless, wrought with night terrors and visions of horrible things. There were things she begged not to see, but was shown nonetheless. Liara's dead body staring up at her with a look of utter betrayal. The entire Arcane College burned to the ground in the deep, rough chuckle of a nightmare. She whirled around, desperately trying to locate the source. "Show yourself!" she cried, hoping she didn't sound as small as she felt. The chuckling grew louder, and she felt a form manifest behind her. She squeaked and rolled around, coming face to face with a massive nightmare. It was at least twice her height, and its mouth curled into a cruel grin. "Hello, little mouse," it growled. She swallowed. Her throat felt very dry. "Leave me alone, creature." Her voice was meek and not nearly as authoritative as she'd hoped. It let out a roaring laugh. "You truly are pathetic, aren't you?" It looked down at her and narrowed its 6 eyes. "But you don't have to be, little mouse. I can make you strong." She shook her head vigorously, like a small child trying to banish a night terror by pretending it didn't exist. "No, please," she whimpered. It laughed again, a booming noise that made her ears ring and bleed. "No, no, no, no," she begged, continued to shake her head. The laughter only grew until it reached a crescendo. "I said no!" she roared this time, her voice echoing with something else, something further away and closer all at once. In a flash of light, the nightmare vanished, and Tessia shot awake, coated in sweat with her hands wrapped around Liara's throat. She gasped and released her vice grip, but Liara didn't stir. Her face was purple and her eyes were wide open, bulging from her skull. "Liara? Oh no, Liara, no!" Tessia sobbed, backing away slowly. She was shaking her head, not wanting to believe the sight in front of her, so she didn't notice when she backed into her bed. She tumbled over and landed on the stone floor with a crack, and everything went dark. Tessia wasn't a suspect in Liara's murder. For one, Tessia's injury implied that she had been attacked as well, and for another, her family's influence made sure to steer the investigation away from her as much as possible. She never spoke of the attack to anyone, and most assumed that she or Liara had been raped. She couldn't admit to being a murderer, let alone one influenced by a nightmare. It wouldn't matter how much her family had contributed to the college. She would be killed, or worse, she would be sundered, and she would deserve it. So she sat with her guilt, lived with it, and tried to become a worthy woman of forgiveness in the eyes of the gods. Lady Sunkest was drinking. She hated the taste of alcohol, but she needed to medicate. It was late, and the tavern was empty of most of its rowdier patrons. It was just her, the barmaid Layla, and an elven girl called Minthy. Minthy was a strange girl, Born in Stronghold, she'd lost her mother and most of the rest of her family when the Draugr breached the gates during the last cataclysm. Despite that, her golden amber eyes never seemed to lose their luster or their sense of mischief. Tessia swirled the copper-colored liquid in her glass, staring at the way the ice clinked against the walls of the cup. Gods, was she always this easily entertained? You look terrible. Minty slid into the seat across from her, cocking an eyebrow and crossing her arms. Tessia shrugged. I feel terrible. Minty nodded. Oh, yeah, I heard about the lady in the woods. Messy business. Tessia shook her head. No, it's not that. Well, it is a bit. She groaned. Everyone expects me to know what to do. They expect me to know how to be a messiah, how to live by the prophet's example, but She buried her face in her hands. I have no idea what I'm doing, Minty. I have no idea how to lead or how to protect people. I know people say Tyr saved me from the explosion at the temple, but I'm worried he made the wrong choice. Minty frowned. You sound tired, Tess. I am very tired, Minty. I need a break. The elf bit her lip, a look of mischief creeping across her face. I have an idea. Then Minty took her by the hand and gave it a little squeeze. Come on, I want to show you something. Tessia felt a lightness in her stomach, something she hadn't felt since before her awakening. She nodded in hesitant acceptance. By the time they finished, Isidore's maps had been hidden around Sanctuary, Lucrezia's books had been reorganized by color, and Edric's shield had been painted bright red with a picture of Minty shooting arrows into paladins' faces. It was a much-needed reprieve from leading the Legion. It felt nice to just spend time with Minty and do stupid bullshit. It gave her a new appreciation for her often blasé attitude. Sometimes raging against the dying of the light was sticking your tongue out at it and blowing raspberry. Thanks, Minty. That was good. Thank you. Tessia laughed, slightly out of breath from running from Edric after he discovered their little masterpiece. I'm surprised you had fun, Tess. I thought you'd be some stuffy, stuck-up Pompey. You really are just a girl when it comes down to it, aren't you? Minty laughed, kicking her legs up the side of the roof of the temple where they'd made their escape. That's what I've been trying to tell everyone, Tessia shrugged. Minty smiled. God, she had a nice smile. And nice eyes. Wait, what? Tessia looked away, blushing. She wasn't supposed to feel this way about another woman, was she? She'd never heard it explicitly condemned, but all the stories she read were about men and women. Wasn't that normal? Are you all right? Tessia bit her lip and looked back at Minty. I don't know. Is there something I can do? Tessia thought for a moment, then nodded. Can I kiss you? Minty looked taken aback, and Tessia was almost worried she'd overstepped, that there really was something wrong with her, until Minty leaned over and put her arm around her neck. Tessia let a small gasp and then melted into the kiss. Her lips were chapped and rough, but they tasted like honey. Minty's fingers on her neck tickled, and she would have laughed if not for fear that breaking the kiss would bring her back to reality, to a world where something that felt so right could maybe be wrong. Minty broke the kiss first, and Tessia couldn't help to smile, the small whine that escaped her lips. Spirits, have you ever kissed anyone before? Tessia's face turned tomato red, and she shook her head bashfully. Minty laughed. Every time she laughed, Tessia liked it more. Well, let's catch up on lost time. She pounced, and Tessia squeaked, almost rolling off the roof. Let's get off the roof first. Tessia stared at the ground worriedly. Minty sighed. Yeah, you're probably right. She pressed a quick kiss to Tessia's lips. Race you to the bottom. She nimbly leapt from the roof, and Tessia groaned and followed after. When she reached the bottom, however, she was stopped by a breathless young man, one of Isidore's runners, by the symbol of the open-closed eye on his cuirass. What is it, Agent? She crossed her arms, glowering despite herself. Sorry to interrupt, Your Eminence, but it's urgent. It's a missive from someone calling himself the Harbinger. Well, what is it? The runner swallowed. He wishes to claim responsibility for the attack on the Temple of Last Rest, and he wants you to know that he's not stopping there.